the sterile glow of a laptop screen, cast long shadows across Stephanie White's apartment. Outside her window, the city moved as it always did, sirens in the distance, tires on asphalt, lives continuing without interruption. Normally, that sound grounded her. Tonight it didn't. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard. These were hands trained to command meetings, to shape narratives, to steer digital ecosystems. And yet, they hesitated. Across her screen was a name she hadn't spoken, hadn't consciously summoned, in 17 years. Nate Martin. Nate Martin lived two lives. One was visible, polished, admired, and trusted. The other lived in secrecy, fed by lies and protected by silence. Long before the church, long before the marriage, there was Stephanie. She believed in him. She trusted his words, his faith, his promises. But behind her back, Nate was already betraying her. When she confronted him with the truth, he did not repent or explain. He walked away, calling her questions disobedience and her boundaries a distraction. And in public, without remorse, he abandoned her. Years later, Nate married, and to the world he appeared faithful and redeemed. But marriage did not change him. It only gave him cover. For 15 years, every year revealed another woman and another lie. Always the same pattern: charm, spiritual language, and denial. One affair did not end quietly. She did not disappear or accept silence. She unraveled as the lies continued. The lies Nate carried for decades finally followed him home. She pulled the trigger. Nate was shot. Then his wife, the woman who trusted him, was shot too. The consequences he avoided for years arrived all at once. Public, violent, irreversible. The woman he once blamed was no longer broken. She survived, and the truth finally stood exposed. This was not temptation. It was entitlement. The article was ruthless in its efficiency. An exposé, allegations, misconduct, abuse of power, a respected religious leader, unraveling in public view. There were photos, old, grainy, pulled from forgotten corners of the internet. But there was no mistaking him. Reports followed. A violent crime, 2 people gravely wounded, someone close to him. The past did not knock. It arrived as a headline. A cold dread settled into Stephanie's chest. This wasn't just shock. It was recognition. Memories surged without permission. The sting of his words, the hollowness of his absence, the shame that followed her for years. Her body reacted before her mind could catch up. A subtle tremor. Stephanie White was 37 now, a senior executive, respected, in control. She had built a life far removed from the fragile young woman she once was. But this was different. This wasn't a private memory, it was a spectacle. Old photos resurfaced, stripped of context, repurposed for gossip. Her past had become clickable. She closed the article, then opened it again, as if reality might change. If she looked twice. She hadn't spoken to Nate in 17 years, not since the day he ended everything. Still, she answered. His voice was calm, controlled, familiar. He spoke of concern, of reputation, of damage control. He spoke of Nate mentioning her, speaking highly of her position, of what she could do. She listened. Not once did he speak of victims, only optics. When the call ended, the silence felt heavier than the noise before it. Stephanie closed her laptop, and the past opened anyway. The silence after the call lingered, not because of what was said, but because of what was avoided. No mention of harm, no naming of victims, only reputation, only optics. Stephanie closed her eyes, and time folded inward. 17 years collapsed into a single breath. They'd been young then, students, idealistic, bound by belief, by ambition, by the certainty that love and faith would be enough. Nate spoke easily of calling, of destiny, and she listened. She felt chosen, seen, aligned, until the day it ended. It was a Tuesday afternoon. rain pressing against the cafe windows. She waited with her hands wrapped around a cup she never drank from. He arrived distant, already gone. He did not sit. He stood, and then he said it. He was leaving. Not just her, the city, the life they imagined. He spoke of calling, of focus, of a future that no longer included her. There was no negotiation, no tenderness, just finality. She felt the room listening, strangers aware. Her face burned. When he walked out, he took certainty with him. She walked home in the rain, each step heavier than the last. The rejection did not stay in that cafe. It followed her. Unlovable, unworthy, disposable. She never returned to the church. Not after the silence, not after no one came looking. The shame stayed, quiet, patient. The humiliation did not fade. It lingered, not as memory, but as belief. She carried it into rooms, into conversations, into silence. In public, she learned to perform, to smile without substance, to speak without revealing. At a party weeks later, she saw him across the room, relaxed, surrounded. She tried to appear composed. Then, a glance, brief, dismissive. She felt exposed, as if the room could see what she was trying to hide. She left early. Avoidance became routine. She chose longer routes, sat farther back, spoke less. She poured herself into work, into discipline, into achievement. It looked like strength. It felt like survival. At night, she replayed conversations that no longer existed. Words she wished she'd said. Questions never answered. She wrote letters she never sent. Her faith grew quiet. Sermons spoke of grace, but shame spoke louder. Years passed. Slowly, without announcement, she rebuilt. Not by being chosen, but by choosing herself. And still, the scar remained. Not an open wound, just a reminder of where her worth had once fractured. Healing did not arrive as forgiveness. It arrived as understanding, not of him, but of herself. With time, she learned to separate what happened from who she was. The rejection had never been proof. It was a mirror, held by someone who could not see clearly. She stopped asking why she wasn't enough. She started asking why she had believed it. Power returned, quietly. In the decisions she made, in the boundaries she kept, in the silence she no longer feared. When she heard his name again, years later, it did not collapse her. It clarified. The man had not changed. The pedestal had. She could see now how charisma can masquerade as calling, how authority can distort love, and how devotion can silence instinct. None of that was her failure. It was a system that rewarded his certainty and punished her doubt. She no longer needed his apology or his explanation. Closure, she learned, is not something given. It is something claimed. There is a moment when survival is no longer enough, when endurance asks to become truth. Stephanie had spent years mastering composure, turning pain into productivity, silence into safety. But the story kept asking to be told. Not for justice, not for revenge, but for alignment. She did not need to be believed by everyone. She needed to believe herself. So she stopped explaining, stopped shrinking, stopped waiting for permission to be told. She once believed being left meant she wasn't enough, that if he walked away, it was her fault. But the truth is simple. He didn't leave because she lacked anything. He left because he never changed. He cheated, not once, but in patterns. What felt like rejection was actually protection, because staying would have cost her peace. Now she's grateful he left, grateful she didn't have to keep begging someone to become who they promised to be. Sometimes rejection isn't loss. Sometimes it's the gift that saves you.